The world seemed to narrow until only the two of them existed, standing at the edge of everything they had known. The wind whipped around them, carrying whispers of the past, echoes of promises, and the weight of choices that had led them here. Every step, every heartbeat, every glance had been a prelude to this single point, a point where time itself seemed suspended, and the consequences of all that had come before would finally collide with reality. He could feel it in his chest, a pressure that was more than fear, more than anticipation. It was inevitability, and it would not wait. Her eyes held him captive, and in them he saw everything: the love, the danger, the truth, the betrayal, the hope, and the despair. It was overwhelming, as if her gaze alone carried the force of the universe, demanding acknowledgement, demanding surrender. He tried to speak, tried to find words that could capture what he felt, but nothing seemed adequate. And then, slowly, deliberately, she reached out, her hand brushing his, a contact that was electric, grounding, terrifying all at once. In that touch, he felt centuries of longing, lifetimes of connection, and the undeniable certainty that the path they had traveled together had been preparing him for this instant, whether he knew it or not. "You've waited your whole life for this," she said, her voice low, firm, yet trembling just slightly, betraying a vulnerability that matched his own. "But are you ready to see the truth?" The question struck him like a blade. It was not just about them, not just about love. It was about every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of courage and fear that had brought him here. He understood in that moment that the final moment was not simply a union, not simply an answer, but a trial of everything he was, everything he had become, everything he had yet to face. The air thickened, charged with tension so palpable it seemed to vibrate in the bones. The shadows around them deepened, as if the world itself leaned in, watching, waiting. He could feel the gravity of destiny pressing down, demanding truth, demanding clarity, demanding courage. And in that silence, in the tension, in the weight of everything, he realized the ultimate revelation. Love, real love, forever love, was not safe, was not easy, and might not even survive, but it demanded risk, demanded surrender, demanded a leap into uncertainty. He swallowed, heart pounding, mind racing through every memory, every shared glance, every whispered word. He saw the fragility of life, the inevitability of loss, and yet he also saw a possibility, an intensity so profound it threatened to consume him. I am ready," he whispered, though even as he said it, doubt flickered. Could words alone meet the demands of what was about to unfold? Could courage alone withstand the weight of destiny? He did not know. All he knew was that he could no longer retreat, could no longer deny the force that had led him here, could no longer pretend that the final moment would wait for him to feel prepared. She smiled, a mixture of sorrow and hope, understanding and challenge, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt entirely exposed and entirely alive. The world around them seemed to collapse, compress, and converge until nothing existed beyond the space between them. And then, in a heartbeat, a single truth became undeniable. The final moment was not a choice. They were both bound to it, by fate, by love, by everything that had ever been whispered, hidden, or dreamed between them. And just as they leaned into it, bracing for what must come, the ground beneath them shifted, not physically, but spiritually, emotionally, irreversibly. He realized with a shock that forever was not a promise, not a reward. It was a challenge, and the question that had been lingering since the first step of this journey crystallized with terrifying clarity. Could they survive the truth of being forever with each other, or would the final moment consume them both, leaving nothing but echoes of what might have been? The answer hung in the air, unspoken, terrifyingly close, as the final moment drew them in, relentless, unavoidable, and eternal. The air between them pulsed with unspoken truths, and he felt it in every fiber of his being, a tension so sharp it cut through his thoughts like a blade. Every instinct screamed that what was coming could not be undone, yet every desire whispered that he could not turn away. She moved with a certainty that unsettled him, as if she carried knowledge older than time itself. He realized with a jolt that the life he had believed he understood, the love he had cherished, the purpose he had pursued, none of it was prepared him for this convergence of fear, longing, and revelation. He tried to speak, but words failed. They always failed when the weight of reality pressed too heavily on the chest, when the soul understood before the mind could articulate. She studied him, eyes narrowing just slightly, reading the tremor in his voice, the hesitation in his stance. "You've imagined this moment countless times," she said softly, "but reality is never kind to imagination." And just like that, the fragile veneer of confidence he had worn for years cracked, exposing the raw, vulnerable core he had tried so hard to shield. Memories surged unbidden. Every shared glance, every whispered promise, every stolen moment of connection that had felt insignificant at the time, but now seemed like a prelude to something monumental. He remembered how she had vanished before his eyes once, leaving only traces of her presence, and how he had spent years chasing shadows, constructing meaning from fragments. And now, standing in the space between fear and hope, he realized the truth. She had not vanished. She had been waiting, always waiting, guiding him, testing him, shaping the man he had become. Yet the revelation carried a cost he had not anticipated. The depth of her presence, the intensity of their connection, revealed not just love, but danger, a danger that threatened to consume him if he faltered. He understood that this was not simply a moment of reunion, it was a trial, a reckoning of choices, a confrontation with the consequences of every decision he had made. His heart raced, mind scrambling to reconcile what he wanted with what he must face. How could something so intimate, so tender, also be so unbearably perilous? She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her breath, close enough that the line between them seemed to dissolve. And then she spoke, a single phrase that struck him like lightning, cutting through fear, hope, and desire all at once. "Are you willing to risk everything, even yourself, for the truth of us?" The question landed like a hammer, echoing in the empty spaces of his mind, leaving him breathless. He had faced death before, had stared into the eyes of enemies, had walked through storms of doubt, but this question was unlike anything he had known. It demanded not bravery, not cunning, not endurance, but complete surrender. He searched for an answer, any answer, but his mind was a storm of conflicting impulses. Part of him wanted to flee, to preserve what little remained of a life he had carefully constructed. Another, deeper, more desperate, screamed to step forward, to embrace the truth, to meet the final moment with courage, even if it meant losing everything. And in that struggle, he realized something terrifying. The final moment might not just change their lives, it could change him, fundamentally, irreversibly, in ways he could neither predict nor control. And just as he braced himself to answer, a movement behind her, subtle but undeniable, sent a shock through him. Someone or something was watching, waiting, calculating. The revelation he had anticipated was not the only force in motion. There were stakes beyond love, beyond destiny, beyond even their understanding. And in that instant, he understood that the moment they shared was not only a culmination, it was a prelude to a confrontation far greater, far more dangerous than he had imagined. Could love survive when the truth itself carried the power to destroy everything, even the heart that dared to hold it? He stepped forward, though each movement felt heavier than the last, as though the air itself had thickened, pressing against him, demanding he hesitate. The shadow stretched before him, a darkness that was not just absence of light, but presence, a weight of inevitability that had been shaping every choice he had made since the day she had first entered his life. Every instinct screamed, every memory warned, but his feet continued, because he knew that destiny did not wait, and she did not wait, and the moment of truth was here, whether he embraced it or not. He remembered the nights spent imagining this encounter, rehearsing words he might speak, rehearsing gestures that might convey the depth of what he could not put into speech. And yet, rehearsals were useless now. Words felt brittle, gestures meaningless, because nothing he could have imagined could capture the gravity of what was waiting. She had warned him that some moments were beyond preparation, beyond comprehension, moments that demanded raw honesty, complete surrender, and an acceptance that what came next could shatter everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and life itself. The shadow resolved slowly into a figure, indistinct at first, but unmistakably human. Yet there was a strangeness to her presence, a weight that seemed to bend reality around her, a gravity of inevitability that made his pulse spike and his mind reel. She did not speak at first, and the silence pressed upon him like the tightening of a vice. He wanted to run, to flee into the familiar streets behind him, but he could not. Every step he had taken, every choice he had made, had led him here, to this intersection of fear, longing, and revelation. And he realized with a pang that she had always been waiting, not just for him, but for this exact convergence of fate, timing, and consequence. Her eyes met his, and in that instant the world contracted. Time seemed to fold, compressing years of separation, anticipation, and unspoken truths into a single heartbeat that stretched on endlessly. He could feel her presence in every fiber of his being, like a song embedded in the marrow of his bones, a melody he had known before he even knew he existed. And in that gaze, he saw not just love, not just recognition, but an almost unbearable knowledge of what was to come, a clarity that left him trembling on the edge of revelation. "Do you know why I waited?" she asked, her voice soft yet impossible to ignore, carrying both accusation and understanding. The question struck him with a force that made him stagger, because it demanded honesty he was not sure he possessed, because it demanded a confrontation with truths he had long hidden even from himself. He searched his memory for the right response, for a way to deflect, to justify, to explain the choices that had brought him here. But there was no deflection, there was no hiding, and the moment stretched longer, each second a drumbeat of inevitability, each breath a reminder that the story they had been part of was about to reach its most dangerous, most intimate turning point. He swallowed hard, forcing the words from his throat, though they came jagged and raw. I thought I understood," he admitted, his voice catching. "I thought I could prepare. I thought I could control it. But I was wrong. Every step I took, every choice I made brought me here. And now I see there is no control, only truth, only this." She tilted her head, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. "Only this," she echoed, and the words reverberated through him. And then, in a shift so sudden it stole his breath, she stepped closer, closer than reason would allow, closer than propriety, closer than logic or expectation. And in that closeness, in that space between them, he understood the weight of everything, the years of anticipation, the fractured hopes, the fragile promises, the unspoken fears. Every story, every whispered thought, every hidden longing coalesced into this single, unbearable point of connection. And yet, before he could fully process it, before the world could settle into comprehension, the ground beneath them shifted, not literally, but in perception, in understanding. Something unseen, something profound, something that had been waiting behind every choice and every heartbeat, made itself known. He realized with a shock that this moment, the moment he had thought was about reunion, about love, about fulfillment, was not just a meeting, it was a test, a revelation, a reckoning, and the outcome was not yet written. Could he endure the truth she was about to reveal, or would the revelation shatter him entirely, leaving nothing but echoes of what could have been? He paused at the edge of the bridge, letting the cold wind lash at his face, letting it remind him that the world outside his thoughts still existed, indifferent and unyielding. Every step he had taken to reach this moment had been deliberate, calculated. But now, standing here with the river roaring beneath him, he realized that calculation was only an illusion. The currents below mirrored the chaos he felt inside, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if surrendering to them might be easier than facing the truth. But he knew better. The truth, messy, raw, and unavoidable, was waiting, and it would not let him turn away. Her voice echoed in his memory, soft and sharp at the same time, a melody he could no longer separate from the ache in his chest. You cannot know what it is to hold the world in your hands until it refuses to stay where you place it, she had said. He shivered at the recollection, remembering not just the words, but the look in her eyes, a mixture of warning and longing, certainty and doubt. She had always known more than he could grasp, had always moved with an understanding that made him feel both inadequate and in awe, and now he had to act on the knowledge she had given him, even if it led to ruin. He thought of the letters, the hidden notes he had kept tucked beneath floorboards, beneath loose stones, beneath layers of ordinary life. Each one was a fragment of her, a piece of the puzzle he was desperate to complete. He had read them countless times, memorized their edges, traced the words with trembling fingers, and still the final line of every letter, the one that would tell him whether hope or despair awaited, remained unread. He had avoided it, knowing that the moment of revelation could break him, yet here he was, unable to step back, unable to ignore the pull of destiny, unable to stop himself from walking straight into the fire he had been dancing around for years. The city behind him was quiet, but not empty. Shadows moved with intent, and he felt them watching, calculating, waiting for him to slip. He could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken understanding that the world was poised on the brink of something monumental. He had encountered fear before, had stared down men who would have killed him without a second thought. But this was different. This was not a man, or a mob, or even a law. This was something older, more cunning, something that had been shaping every step he had taken without his consent. And still he moved forward, because to stop now would be to admit weakness, and weakness was not an option. Every street he crossed, every doorway he passed seemed to stretch longer, as if the city itself were testing him. Every familiar alley held a new threat, every friendly face was suspect, and every heartbeat was a countdown. He thought of what she had promised him, a final moment, a forever, a culmination of everything they had endured. And yet he realized that forever might come in a form he could not recognize, in a guise that would terrify him, in a revelation that would strip him of certainty and leave him raw, exposed, and utterly transformed. And just as he reached the end of the bridge, the edge of the world he had been navigating so carefully, a shadow fell across the path. Not a person, not a figure he could name, but a presence, a knowing, watching presence that made his stomach tighten and his hands sweat. It was neither enemy nor friend, yet it carried the weight of both, and he understood in an instant that this was the moment he had been running toward his entire life. Every instinct screamed at him to turn, to retreat, to deny the path that had been laid before him, but he could not, because he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that once he stepped forward, there would be no going back. Was he ready to face what waited beyond that shadow, or had he only imagined courage until this very second? She was gone the moment he turned away, and yet he knew she had never truly left. Every heartbeat whispered her name, every shadow bore her memory, and every choice he made was bound to a fate he could neither escape nor fully understand. What if the life he thought he was living was only a prelude to the moment he would lose everything, or perhaps gain something far darker than love? The streets were silent, but the air hummed with anticipation. He could feel it in the tightening of his chest, in the way his hands trembled without reason, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting. He remembered the first time she had looked at him, not with fear, not with longing, but with the piercing certainty of someone who knew the weight of his soul. That gaze had followed him through empty corridors, past the flickering lights of the marketplace, through nights when the wind carried whispers of things he dared not name. And now, standing on the edge of a decision he could not undo, he wondered how so much time could feel like a single heartbeat, stretched taut across eternity. He had tried to prepare himself, though preparation was a fragile illusion. Words he had rehearsed crumbled under the weight of silence. Every thought led back to her laughter that seemed to bend the air itself, her hands that fit his as though they had been carved for one another long before he knew how to measure time. The people around him were shadows, moving with lives that felt almost inconsequential compared to the singular truth he was chasing. And yet, there was danger here, lurking in the familiar streets, in the smiles of strangers who might as well have been specters sent to test his resolve. He thought of promises, of vows spoken in whispers and echoes, of the lives that had intersected with his own in ways that were not random, but orchestrated by something larger, something cruel and unyielding. How many had come before him, faced the same choices, and stumbled, blinded by desire or fear. He could not falter. Not now. He could not allow the past to claim what he still had a chance to grasp. The city seemed to lean closer, walls closing in as if to remind him that time was neither patient nor forgiving. And then a memory struck him like a physical blow. The last time she had been truly near, before the walls went up, before words became inadequate, before the inevitability of separation had settled like dust over their lives. She had spoken of eternity as though it were something they could touch, something that could be held between fingers and hearts. But eternity was not patient, and it did not wait for mortal hearts to catch up. He realized with sudden clarity that every choice he had made, every step he had taken, was leading him not just toward her, but toward a reckoning he had yet to comprehend. He moved through the shadows, aware that every footfall could betray him, aware that every glance from a passerby might conceal a threat, aware that the moment of confrontation, when the world would finally demand the truth of his heart, was closer than he had dared to imagine. There was no turning back. Each breath pulled him forward, each heartbeat drew him nearer to a revelation he was both longing for and terrified to meet. And then, just as the horizon seemed to stretch endlessly before him, a sudden realization struck, a truth he had avoided, a truth that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about her, about himself, about the fragile thread that held their worlds together. Could it be that the final moment he had been preparing for was not what he expected, but something far disastrous, something that would change everything? The world seemed to narrow until only the two of them existed, standing at the edge of everything they had known. The wind whipped around them, carrying whispers of the past, echoes of promises, and the weight of choices that had led them here. Every step, every heartbeat, every glance had been a prelude to this single point, a point where time itself seemed suspended, and the consequences of all that had come before would finally collide with reality. He could feel it in his chest, a pressure that was more than fear, more than anticipation. It was inevitability, and it would not wait. Her eyes held him captive, and in them he saw everything: the love, the danger, the truth, the betrayal, the hope, and the despair. It was overwhelming, as if her gaze alone carried the force of the universe, demanding acknowledgement, demanding surrender. He tried to speak, tried to find words that could capture what he felt, but nothing seemed adequate. And then,